project manager, and I was just introducing main blasting, which will be doing the blasting. So there's no objections. Let's go ahead and get started with the presentation, then we'll do questions afterwards, if that's all right. With that, Guy.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Guy Keefe. I work as a manager for main drilling and blasting, and we've been invited here tonight to talk a little bit about the project. Some of our goals tonight are really just to come down here, introduce ourselves to you folks, tell you a little bit about the project, what we plan on doing, and then I've also invited Ken Smith. He's the manager of our technical group. I've asked him to come down and give a little bit of information on exactly what drilling and blasting is. Basically just a blasting 101 to also help answer some of the questions. So I think, again, the presentation topics tonight, we're going to introduce you a little bit to the company, Main Drilling and Blasting, talk a little bit about it, and then just do some blast planning, blast safety discussions, and then Kenny will talk a little bit about how explosives break rock. Am I okay? Am I blocking anybody's view? Can everybody see the screen enough? And can everybody hear me? All right,
That's fine, right
is
there.
this better?
Yeah.
Would it help if I turn the screen a little?
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna,
Just want to make sure everyone's okay. So, kicking off, who we are. Like Doran said, we are Main Drilling and Blasting. This year we're celebrating our 50th year in business. The company was founded in Gardner, Maine by Ted and Judy Parrington. Small family business for many years that expanded its reach, mostly because of servicing its customers. Currently, we are one of the larger blasting contractors in the area. We work in all 6 New England states, and as well as we have offices down in the Mid-Atlantic region in Pennsylvania. The company, currently we're employing about 80 drills and 400 employees when we're at our biggest peak. The group that's going to be doing this work is what my company calls the Western Division, and the Western Division encompasses all of Vermont and parts of upstate New York, and that's the group that I'm involved with, and that's the group that will be doing this project. The majority of the people that will be working this project will be Vermonters. I know I certainly don't have a Vermont accent, and just get that right out there. I'm not from Vermont, but I went to school here, and I've been living here and raising my family here for the last 10 years. The company's committed to this region and trying to provide good jobs for Vermonters. The project itself, I think everybody in the room is familiar with the project, I would assume, but quickly, it's an extension of existing turbines. There's 15 additional turbines that are going to be getting built. There are 8 turbines that will be built on the West Ridge, which is in Searsburg, and then 7 more down in Reedsboro. So our part of this project is we're going to come in and we're going to drill and blast for these turbines, and the scope of our work is really limited to on-site activities. All the blasting will take place for the roadways, the turbine pad site, the turbine sites themselves, and maybe a little bit of blasting in the operations and maintenance buildings, the O&M buildings, as well as there's a collector line that connects the 2 ridges. And we don't know if there's ledge there, but we suspect there may be. So, that's the general scope of our work. We think that there's approximately 150,000 cubic yards of ledge on the project, and we think that the average cut of that rock profile is about 5.5 feet. So in a general sense, we're not talking about massive earth excavation. It's real shallow blasting by our standards. I see you have a picture. Is that a question?
No,
Okay.
just hold it up. I didn't say anything, you spoke to me.
Sorry. So on this site, the average cut is 5 feet, so relatively shallow blasting on the average sense of it. I've got a map here that just kind of gives an overview. This is the entire project, and then this piece here is more specific to the Searsburg piece. You can see the red areas are the indicators that we may have a rock cut, and the blue are the areas that would be potentially filled.
Fill from the blasting?
Meaning, yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the site balances and what they fill it with, but when we look at it, the areas of impact that we're involved
Where
with.
all the other projects have been filled with the blasting. You haven't been told?
It's my understanding, and if I'm speaking online, I'd ask one of you guys to jump in, that it's a relatively balanced site, meaning that the cut areas will go into the fill areas and mostly balance the site. Is that fair to say, gentlemen?
That is correct.
That's not a topographical map.
This is not, this is a, it's one of our just engineered maps that we've overlaid onto a Google Earth map.
Where is the peak, according to the blast area?
I don't know the highest point. It's not.
Well, the highest point's actually
Mine.
Reedsboro, Searsburg.
No, I meant this
Okay.
bridge right here, that's what I'm talking.
It's off the map on the bottom. Because what you're looking at is just so everybody
Is
gets
that to the left or the right?
the bottom.
The bottom
Bottom?
would be the southern edge of it.
What's the red line on the outside?
So the red line on the outside is a half a mile radius now, and I'll speak a little bit to what this is and why it's relevant to this project.
So the blue line there, that's the projected road and the turbine sites, correct?
Yes.
So that's
Blue
where the
road
blasting
coming in.
would occur along that blue line for your road infrastructure, correct?
Correct.
So
And
that's basically the ridge, Frank. You know, that blue line, that's gonna be the top of the mountain right there.
And you can see kind of where that overhead transmission line is now. If you can see in the center of the map, it's kind of cut through the trees. So you kind of see a visual representation of
Where it is, I know what you're talking about. The red dots are the,
red dots are existing houses. These are the neighboring houses. And again, speaking to the half a mile radius, the Public Service Board for this project put a requirement out that we offer pre-blast surveys and well monitoring to a half a mile radius for this project. So we put the line on there just to kind of give an indicator as to what the actual effect is and how far.
So pre-blast surveys, you mean you take groundwater elevations, or would you do pump tests, pump drawdown tests?
yeah.
We'll speak to that. I'll jump.
Okay.
If I'll keep going, and then we can hear
I
this.
get it then.
Okay.
So blasting could occur anywhere along that blue line there. You don't know yet until you start excavating, correct? Like that red highlight on that blue line, that doesn't signify a blast area.
Down in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have some rock information that gives us indication that that's where we think the blasting will
Okay,
occur.
so that's a definite blasting area there, and then it depends on what you find when you start excavating. It could occur anywhere along there.
Correct.
So you're not gonna do ground penetrating radar before you do blasting? You're gonna excavate first?
I'm
No, usually we don't do ground penetrating radar unless we're doing a road survey. We did do a full geotech analysis on the site, and had a boring that shows different rock strata, different depths throughout various locations of the site. That's how main blast, I know what I'm expecting, what I'm getting into, because they have the geotechnical engineer's report. That's what's expected, but
What's in that
again,
report? Just general data for the area, correct?
no, it's specific. We went out ahead of time with a geotech company and did borings at locations along the road, the Onan building, the substation, each turbine location. So it's spread out throughout the entire wind farm. So there's
You've
a
already started working there. You've done borings up there?
yes. So we have that data. The other thing I want to point out is we talked the half-mile radius, and I apologize for jumping ahead, but it seems like there's a lot of concern.
jump right in.
That if you don't mind, I'll point this out, but a different map we had, we looked at what's the half-mile radius of West Any house, and it actually stops about right here on the road. So only this section really is the only section, if they blast, that would even be within a half-mile radius. The entire site, the rest of this ridge, and the ridge that's on the Reedsboro side, the Searsburg wind farm, is outside the half-mile radius. So when we're talking just that area. With that, sorry.
So you're gonna tell us why that's important, that half-mile radius?
Because that's the threshold that was set by the Public Service Board,
For
blasting.
For
For
pre-blast.
notices.
for notice,
for
so you give them
notifications.
notice, but is there a limitation in terms of how close you can be to a residence? Could you be
I
as
think
far
he's
away?
gonna cover that.
We'll touch on that in
Okay.
some of the areas that we've worked on. So
Click away.
Yes.
Are you staying on the screen for a minute?
I can.
Okay. What is the fat red, I know it's that red line, what is the thin red line outside of the fat red line?
I don't know.
Right at the top of
I don't know that. My engineer put this together. I honestly don't know.
Okay. Are the turbine sites specified on those little?
Yeah, that's exactly, you can see the turbine sites, they're
So there's
designated.
1, 2, 3,
And I
we're
think,
only looking at 4.
yeah, and I kept the map on the northern side of it because as you head south, there are no houses that are influenced by this section of the work.
Okay.
So on this piece, I think it's 7, is it 8 turbines on this side?
Yeah.
Yes, on this side.
So what's the red in the big blue area?
So the red in here is indicating potential ledge cut, and the blue is potential fill.
And that's basically at the top of Putnam Road, that big blue area there?
Yes.
That's your lay down area or
Yes.
something?
Yes.
And Guy, how far do you go to make the pads for each window? How deep? How
I
deep do you excavate and or blast to make one of the windows?
All the pad sites are differently, and they're all built differently, and I don't know the exact dimensions off the top of my head with each one of these. I referenced the average cut, and that's the aggregate of all the.
What's the max?
The maximum on this ridge, I think, is 22 feet.
So what's this average 5-foot rock cut mean?
Average 5-foot means that for the entire project area, the rock cut to get it down to the grade of the road or to the grade of the turbine pad averages out to be 5 feet. That needs to be lowered to get to the design grade.
It's 25 feet below.
Okay, but how far down would you blast?
For a 5-foot hole, you would blast 8 to 9 feet.
Next to some of the sites.
So if 5 foot is average, what's the
The
deepest?
deepest on this ridge is 21 feet.
What about the other ridge?
21 feet for average rock cut or 21 feet for blast?
21 feet for blasting.
Okay.
And just to clarify, the deepest part is at the turbine locations, so they can blast to put the foundations in for the turbines, which is substantially outside.
It's the measurement on the deepest rock cut on this ridge line is 5,000 feet from the nearest structure, from the nearest home. So, and that's an approximate measurement, it's not
So
exact.
what's the deepest cut on both project ridge lines?
It's approximately, I think on the I guess it would be the eastern ridge, it would be around 31 feet.
And to clarify that, it's not left at 31 feet, it's blasted.
Yes.
The spread footer for the foundation's built and that's backfilled back in, so when you're done, you'll see the pedestal of the wind turbine sticking out, but the concrete's only about a foot out, and then it will match the grade, the existing grade that was already there, so it's not a 30-foot hole that's left because they're blasting. So remember, that's only to accommodate the construction process, it's not the final product that will be left on the site only.
So when you're blasting 31 feet deep, how wide and long is that? Like, you're not just going straight down like 10 by 10, you're going like how big?
So I don't know the exact dimensions of where that deepest piece is, and, so I wouldn't want to reference exactly what it is, but the typical tower pad sites, do you know the dimensions?
Well, a typical spread footer, and it's dependent on turbine height, it's usually right around 45 to 55 feet, depending on the turbine type, wide.
How many yards of concrete each footing for the turbines?
How much concrete you asked?
Yeah, how many yards go into it?
Again, they're probably 250 to 350, and sometimes special ones have to 600. And I don't remember the specific design for this project off the top of my head, but that's just the range.
So when you're saying 40, is that 45 feet wide, 45 feet long? say
I can
31
get back to
feet
that
deep?
a little bit.
It's,
Just, maybe I can help out here a little bit with regards to your question and your question. How did you come up with those red spots and those blue spots? That's because the geotechnical report and the borings data told us how far down the rock was from the
They
surface.
didn't do ground penetrating radar to tell you where the rock really was.
Been doing it 40 years, never done it. Never done it ever for blasting. And it's because it's not customary to use for blasting. You know why? Because
Too expensive, that's why.
no, it doesn't tell us whether the rock can be excavated or blasted. Would you want us to excavate the rock? If we could, would you just have us blast the rock that could be excavated?
No, I can blast it all.
Okay, so.
Well, if I interrupt for a second, I think we're stuck on some type of expert analysis from engineers, because, geotech takes corings, and tests corings at different lanes, so That's the preferred method that all the engineers use, so I don't want to get wrapped up about the type of geotech work we did or engineering work, but maybe we can get through the presentation, and maybe a lot of these answers the questions will be answered, and maybe we can get to the end, and then maybe we'll bring up more, and we can address them at the end, so we're stuck on slide 4, I think. So, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and again, continuing our presentation, we do a lot of work in Vermont. We've done some of these works. I know you referenced Kingdom Wind. We've done Belco Southern Loop, Sheffield Wind, Addison County Gas. Some of the linear projects that we worked on that are larger scale. Blasting can be scaled down as well, and some of the projects that we've highlighted here are the opposite end of that spectrum, where we're working in tight in a very controlled setting. You can see this picture here is showing us working at the State House in Maine. And then, in this picture here, we're working in Hopkinton, Mass. At the EMC corporate headquarters. We're lowering the garage and actually blasting in the basement while the workers were above us. So, in Boston here, this is Mass General Hospital that you see. As we were blasting 60,000 yards for the new residents, they were conducting surgery, less than 100 feet away.
Right, but that's not the type of blasting you're doing.
It's not. It's not. But
nothing to do
and
with
my intent for showing these slides is that we have the ability to design and plan for the environment that we're working on, and that obviously we've got more distance, and we're gonna maybe adjust our blasting to reflect the environment that we're working in. But our intent is always to build good, safe projects and be responsible to the environment that we're working in. All of it starts with pre-blast surveys and hazard assessments. We've spent some time walking the ridges. We've been looking at plans, and we've done a lot of blast design to this point to try to put a plan that's responsible for this project and allows us to get through it in a safe and efficient manner and help this project get built. All of it starts with pre-blast surveys. Sorry that this is so small. This is typically industry standard for pre-blast survey offering is 250 to 300 feet. For this project, the Public Service Board has extended that range to a half a mile to make sure that we cover all the people that could potentially be impacted by the project. Most of the blasting on this project is more than 1,500 feet away from the houses. There is some limited blasting that's going to get close in. We'll scale down our operations, and I think we showed it on the map earlier at the end of Putney Road where the existing house is sitting. That's probably as close as you're going to get to to any existing structures.
So when you're 500 feet from a house, do you use your surgical approach like you would do in downtown Boston?
We absolutely do.
So you use smaller charges, lots of small
We
charges?
hit it right in the head. And Kenny later on today is going to actually get into the science of how blasting breaks rock. And your point is exactly right on. When we're 5,000 feet away at the 31-foot cut, and there's no opportunity to impact anything, yeah, we're going to be maybe a little more aggressive with our approach.
Bears? What do you mean there's no opportunity to impact anything? This is all important bear habitat. What about them?
Understood.
Are you going to be using blasting maps? What happens if
We'll
you...
talk a little bit about site security and how we handle that.
I mean, this is like,
It doesn't matter.
this is bear feeding season.
Understood.
Get it
But
in
to your point is, as we get closer to houses and structures, we will absolutely scale down our approach to represent the area.
Well, we have environmental studies that's taking place, and we have habitat studies, and we work with A&R and DES, and they're fully engaged in water quality and any other report that you can think of. So we didn't come prepared to bring A&R or the environmental consultants with us to talk about bears.
But we're talking
I think we want to talk about
Blasting and how it
Blasting.
affects
The
this
bears.
town.
that's already been taken into account when it went through the Public Service Board, all of it as a package deal. So we didn't bring the package to talk about the entire project impacts. We came as
What
direction
the
to talk
Public
about
Service
blasting.
Board was you're gonna blast. That was basically it. We're gonna use explosives to blast.
I don't think so, but if you
There was
don't
a
mind.
party to that docket on the Public Service Board. They gave no detail when the Public Service Board awarded their certificate of public good.
I think we're getting a lot more details, and I want to go here, but I will bring
That's
up
why
one
I call
point.
you out when you say the Public Service Board okayed it. They did.
Well, they gave us a certificate to proceed, so I would say they gave us
Yes, they did.
okay.
They didn't give certificate to proceed and blow the top off the mountain and blow the whole mountaintop.
You're right, because we're not blowing the whole entire mountain.
What's the
time
frame that you're gonna be blasting? What's the end date, I guess?
So, project duration is, we think substantial completion by July of 2017.
When's
You're
the
gonna be
start?
blasting through the winter?
The way it's gonna work is, we're not gonna put explosives on the road when it's unsafe, so we're gonna work in reasonable conditions. Last winter was different than winters in the
No,
past.
I'm thinking about the bear
If
are
we- if
nesting
we-
in the
if we can-
winter.
If we can work safely.
The bear, I'm thinking about the bear are nesting in the winter. You can't be blasting
I don't know anything
when they're
about that.
hibernating.
When are you starting? What date do you expect to start the blast?
I don't know the exact start
What,
date.
in a month?
I do not know the exact start date.
You don't have any idea of the start date? If you're gonna be finished by July, you know how long it takes to do 15
Well, they're gonna
turbines. When are you gonna
clear
start?
the timber, and then you're gonna come in after that, or you're gonna be right on the heels of that.
It'll be close, but it's different ridge lines, it's different aspects, and the reason why they're not sure is because we're still negotiating the sequence of work. The East Ridge, West
Right, but
Ridge.
when does the blasting
But
start?
it will most likely start in the middle of October and go as long as the weather permits, allows this year, and then pick up again next spring.
And do you know where the bear dens are?
I don't personally know.
Does the blasting company know where the bear dens are? If you're blasting in December, you're gonna, they're asleep in their dens.
Just to answer all the questions when it comes to bears, we didn't bring anybody to talk to bears. The only thing I was gonna bring up before I was cut off is, as part of our permit condition, I know that they did survey bear-scarred beech trees and mitigate bear habitat.
That's not their dens where they sleep.
I know, I'm just answering the question I know. I can't answer
It's a
something I
good
don't
question
know.
that wasn't asked. That's good.
So they are, as part of the design is to go around with our collection system through the beech trees that we preserve. But other than that, I can't answer the bear questions.
Well, I'd like an answer to that question. How are you going to protect the hibernating bears in winter?
Well, we can take
They're gonna
that.
at least track the ones with GPSs.
I'm not the bear guy, I'm sorry. I can find out and get you an answer, but I don't have the answer.
So I just want to ask the blasting company, is this an issue you're aware of? Because these are critical bear habitat of an extent we have never seen blasted on ridges before. So is this something that has been brought to your attention? Have you been made aware
Yes.
of the fact that there are
Yes.
hibernating bears and that they extensively use these ridge lines?
Yes.
But a month before you're gonna start blasting, you don't know what you're gonna do about it.
Well, they'll all be in hibernation when they're blasting.
This
That's
is,
the
this is
problem.
pretty simple. This is all started with everybody getting a registered letter that you couldn't read who it came from. And these people have taken time out of their days to come down and ask the experts what's going on. And the question, the answers are very open-ended, about 21 feet, about 31 feet, depending on the height of the top of the rotors, depending on the size of the pads. You should know that, sir. These are people that are asking you direct questions, and you should just give them direct answers. I think that's where the frustration is coming up from. You're an expert in your field, and if somebody asks you how big the pad is square, she's not asking you for a general idea, she's asking you for, you're putting 17 pads, or 8 and 7, or however many, you should know what the pad size is.
Well, that's because there's not only the geotech part of it when they blast, what the rock is and how the shear face and how it's fractured. There's a lot of dynamics, that's why I can't tell you exactly.
But how big
I
is
know
the
how
pad
far
is
the
for?
engineered foundation is, but then they still, however the contractor feels like they need to form it in a workspace for OSHA requirements and benching, they will accommodate that in their plan, which will change the overall width. But that's a site-specific conditions they get into construction. If I had a crystal ball, I could tell you exactly, but I know the footer itself, the spread footer, is 55 feet wide. How far the blast ends up being to accommodate the construction sequence and other criteria that has to be taken into effect, I don't know until they get in there and start doing the work. That's why I'm not saying vague. I know what the minimum is, I don't know what the final result's going to be.
How big could it be, just from your experience?
I wouldn't expect it to be much larger than, that, because OSHA has benching requirements and setbacks for work, but you're talking, I don't know.
Concrete's, you're saying 50 feet wide, we don't want to go any wider than we have to, so another 10 feet maybe.
So, well, I was specifically asking about the hole. Like, if I was to walk up to your site, it's not my department, so I don't know anything about blasting, but if I was to walk up on your site and that 31-foot deep hole, how wide do you have to blast in order to build the pad that you need to build for it? How big could it be?
60 feet, 65?
65 wide and 65 long?
No, it's an octagon foundation, so it would be more circular. So you're talking 30 foot
65 feet
radius.
diameter.
Yes,
And that's how big that hole would potentially look.
yes, plus or minus 5 feet, however it works out with the rock.
Okay.
So if you want to continue, or?
Sure. So, yeah, and speaking of the point that you brought up earlier, as we get into these types of projects, the first thing that we take into account is, what's the appropriate blast design for this project? Some of the factors that play into that blast design is blast location, distance to structures. We take geological conditions into a part of our evaluation process, and we work to build safe blast design based on some of these factors. And, as we get into this project, you're going to see we'll have the blasting zones clearly marked. Safety for us is a big, something that we take very serious and we'll pay a lot of attention to as we get onto the project. We'll make sure that people, equipment, activities in the blast area are monitored and controlled when it comes time to shoot.
Will you be seizing people's land, as you did on Lowell Mountain, 1,000 feet either side of the line, and not allowing people on their land and not allowing due process on that? Just curious, since that's my direct experience.
I cannot speak to that, I do not know.
It is our land, it's
I do not
public
know
land,
where
so
that's-
they basically are seizing it anyway.
But with the adjacent homeowners, if it's 500 feet away, he'd have to move out of his home for 6 months, like my folks weren't allowed on 200 acres of their land for 6 months.
There's no resident within 500 feet that may even come close, except for Janowski's parcel. The one on the corner isn't occupied. So I don't know if anybody else besides him would be even close to the 500 feet.
Wouldn't it be 1,000 feet?
But, and then, so, yeah, I know yours are 500 feet, but.
I thought the safety distance was 1,000 feet.
It was on Lowell.
It was
Oh,
So isn't that standard here? It was on Georgia Mountain too.
I don't know about that.
They sued the neighbors to keep them off their property there, same as at Lowell.
So you guys don't have an established setback from residences for all your projects? You just, whatever the perimeters, if they say 100 feet, you go with that?
Setback for you can't blast?
Yeah.
Actually can't blast?
Right.
No, there's no minimum setback distance.
Wow.
Will there also be a disregard for the state law that says you have to reach an agreement with the adjoining landowner, as it was in Lowell? You never made an agreement with my folks, you just blasted. Actually, the picture that he was showing, the 20-something foot cut, was actually on my folks' land that was stolen by the power company.
Again, you're asking a project I know nothing about.
I was asking the blasters that did it.
It's
We
it.
weren't involved in seizing anybody's land at all, no.
But you were involved in blasting this.
We performed that work, but I do not know anything about.
Your company was
My
part of
company-
a lawsuit.
So you don't verify that you're on the correct property before you start blasting?
We were working all within the property boundaries.
No, you weren't.
I cannot speak to the specifics, I just do not know.
So since
Well-
this is forest land, this is U.S. Forest Service land, I mean, you've sort of given the impression that somehow these big cuts in the rock are going to go away, but this actually still exists on Lowell. There's no safety. I mean, people can walk and go hiking and fall off this. What do you do for protecting the public on public lands when this is left after the fact? If you're doing a 25-foot cut.
Well, can I say something? Because it seems like we're getting off track, because the intention here is to address landowners that have property and the safety concerns of landowners. It sounds like it's turned more into a contractor bashing
No, this
for a
is
previous
public
project.
lands.
No, we don't want this to happen to
That-
us.
I
That's what it
understand.
is.
But
We're
it's something that I can't
landowners. We don't want
answer.
this to happen to us.
I can't answer because you bring up examples of a project I have no experience with at all. So
They have experience with this.
I think
That's
for
why
the
we're
landowners' benefits, who this is directed towards, if we can continue through the presentation and try to answer the question instead of, because we're not expecting cuts like that in this project. I think it's,
This was a
We're getting-
25-foot cut,
I know at a different project.
and you're
I have no
talking about
experience.
31-foot cuts.
That's in a hole, it's gonna be filled later, it's not left.
This,
So,
well, how
if
is,
the board doesn't mind, we move to the presentation.
So at this time, I'd like to introduce Kenny Smith. Kenny's gonna spend some time talking to us a little bit about what blasting is and how blasting breaks rock.
This is a public meeting required by the Certificate of Public Good. This is not a Searsburg Select Board meeting. I want to make that clear. This is for the Certificate of Public Good. You're required to have this public meeting.
We
It's
are.
not a Select Board meeting.
But it's, the focus is the land.
It's not a Select Board meeting.
yes, but
You
we
just
are
asked
the
the select board how
landowners,
to-
this
how to
is
proceed.
public land, so this extends, and I have great respect for the landowners here, but this also is about the public interest here, because this is public lands. This is not anything that has ever been done before. You're not leasing private property here. You are leasing U.S. Forest Service land that we the people own these lands, so we want answers to these questions.
And I can appreciate that, but I can't answer questions related to another project I don't know about.
I'm asking you questions about this project. And I'm
I
asking
think I've
questions
answered
about, like, are you gonna leave cuts in the rock like this, like you have done on other sites? I think it's a reasonable question.
Yes, no. So, can we, at least to the end, in the end, if you can, we'll try it again, but when we get to this, maybe it'll help answer some of the questions, not answer the questions, so.
So I'm here to talk about the science, and I don't know the specifics to be able to answer those types of questions.
Do you know the specifics of this project?
I know what the cuts are, and I know what the distances are.
Okay.
And I know what the nature of
So
the
you
rock
can
is.
answer questions on this project?
Well, I know
Or are
what
you gonna
that,
say, I don't know? Or are you gonna be able to answer questions on this project?
I'm gonna answer the questions that I have the answers to.
You're familiar with the project?
No, what did I just say? I'm here to talk about the science. I know the range of the cuts. I'm here to talk about blasting and the science of blasting. First thing I said is I don't have all the specific knowledge, but I can tell you about the vibration that's going to be generated and what happens in blasting. And I can answer those questions about blasting. That's why I was brought here. I didn't start with the beginning.
That's why I came here. I'd like to know if my fireplace is going to crack, and then
Okay.
I'll go home to my wife. So.
Okay, so that's what it is.
The fighting the project is over.
That's what I'm here for, and I apologize that I don't have all.
That horse is dead.
Okay, so
Let's get on with the nuts and bolts.
So most of the information we learn and know about blasting oftentimes comes from Hollywood, comes from maybe some relative or some experience that someone we know had. We don't typically appreciate or are aware of all the places that explosives are used. You saw some of them earlier, in fact, that posterior fellow that was inside of EMC's corporate headquarters. That's me. I've been doing this about
What was that? I missed that.
There was a picture there about blasting inside of EMC's corporate headquarters with
You were in the picture, okay.
with the laboratory up above, and the building occupied with people.
Pay attention.
And so, I just wanted to
I didn't
explain,
hear what he said.
I've been doing this for 41 years, I'm a third-generation blaster. It's a little too fat right now to be out there in the field, so they bring me up to places like this to explain a little bit about the science. Rock breaks by a mechanism called conical failure. A lot of people think that you lay a charge on the ground or you put a charge on the ground and, you know, if you were to watch Hollywood, a stick of dynamite takes out the whole town. But in reality, we put a charge into a drill hole like that, and a little cone pops out of the ground. What that means is we can't just drill one hole and be able to blast that pad. We've got to spend quite a bit of time drilling a series of holes so that those cones overlap with one another. So the real concept right here is that dynamite doesn't blow down. It's a law of physics. It's not something that we made up. Why is that? Because energy will always take the path of least resistance. Now the path of least resistance is to the nearest point of relief, or the nearest free face, it's called. And where is that when we're drilling that hole? It's not down into solid rock that's underneath, it's up towards the surface. Now, if we had some kind of miracle weapon that we could just drill one hole in there, or explosives, why we certainly would, because it's very expensive to drill those holes. But even as powerful as explosives are, we have to place those holes pretty close together in order to fragment the rock to be blasted. So if you or any one of us were to ask us to be able to do some kind of design that we could move rock like earthquakes do, we couldn't do it. We don't have the power to do that. Because there's a science behind that release of energy, we can control how it's used. So when we load that hole with explosives, we put what's called stemming material, which is crushed stone, because we got to plug that energy inside of that rock. That's what holds the rock, the energy in, to break that cone out. Now, in order for you to visualize that, we have some examples all around us that we maybe don't appreciate. But the same way that an anchor that is in either concrete or in stone, when that's failed, that's the same mechanism that breaks rock, because rock pulls apart in tension the same way that a cone fails in an anchor. Where else do we see that? Anybody ever had to remodel an old house and you strip off that old wallpaper and you have horsehair plaster in there? What do we have to do before we put that new paper up? Everywhere there was a picture hanging, we got one of those little divots right there in the plaster. It's the same science in blasting. If you were to take that plaster wall down, you'd have to have a lot of holes put right together, because that one hole isn't going to take that wall down. That's the same mechanics involved in what we do. In fact, the rules for the folks that build, when these guys come in and they're putting these anchors in, their rules are, make sure that those anchors are so far apart that those little divots don't overlap. Our rules are just the opposite. They don't want that concrete to break. We need that rock to break, so we move those holes in closer together. Now, if we want the rock to fragment sideways, we actually take this rule, which says with anchors, don't put that anchor too close to the edge of concrete, or it's going to break out the side. We will put a drill hole over the edge over here so that we can get that rock to move sideways. That's how we direct the energy when we blast. Exactly that same methodology. When we take this hole and we initiate it first, the rock will move sideways into that relief. If there's a hole behind it, it'll then move into the hole created by the first hole. When two holes work together, and they're close enough, they'll fragment the area that encompasses the two holes. And that's what it looks like in a blast. So, I wish I had my speakers here a little bit, but I'm going to show you a blast going up. And what I want you to look at right here is, right out here, what are these things?
Underground utilities.
Underground utilities. Now, those are stubs. Oftentimes they're live. How close can you get to those with explosives? Because energy takes the path of least resistance, we know that it's going to break up at roughly a 45-degree angle up from the bottom of the hole, so we never can get any closer than that depth of that hole to those utilities, because what's going to cause damage to those is actually physically moving them and displacing them. So when I play this video, what I want you to look at is, and just so you can see, some of this blast is matted. See, those are blasting mats right there in the back, and some of it's not matted. But I want you to look at that little rock right there, and you can see that that rock itself is within the zone of actual permanent displacement, within that 45-degree angle. And you'll actually see that little rock pop up in the air a little bit when the blast goes up. See that? That shot was designed so that it wouldn't have any impact on that material based on that physical principle, how that energy is released. That's what a blast sounds like. I wish I had the speakers to make it a little bit louder for you, but I wanted you to get a little bit of an idea of what's involved in blasting. Now, what Guy said to you here earlier is, yes, a blast is actually scaled to the operation that you're performing. So at Mass General Hospital, where they were performing surgery while we were blasting, yes, that's quite a scale. When we're right next to utilities, that's a different scale. But if we moved a little further back in the lot, we would adjust. There's two things that we're controlling. We're controlling the movement of rock, and and we're also controlling the sound, because by law, we're limited to how much audio we can make, and we're limited to how much we can shake the ground. I'll keep rolling here so that we can see what some of those limitations are, but there's a couple of other scientific principles at work, and when energy is detonated in the ground, an elastic wave moves out from that vibration. What do I mean by elastic? The ground actually vibrates up and down elastically. It doesn't permanently move out, because that's that permanent displacement zone that we were looking at with that boulder. When that wave passes, the ground returns right back to its original position. It's actually only vibrating by law. We're not allowed to make that vibrate in any protected structure more than the thickness of 2 pieces of copy paper. 0.008 of an inch. That's how much they're legally allowed at your home to vibrate. Why this little section is important to us.
That's an OSHA standard, sir? That 2 sheets of paper, level of displacement, is that an OSHA standard?
No, it's not an OSHA standard.
Is that an industry
The
standard?
Bureau of Mines did about 40 years worth of study to determine what was a safe level for blasting. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit, because I'm going to show you some.
It's probably less than frost moves your house every year.
Is it an MSHA standard?
No, it's a state standard, and it's an industry standard based on that research. So the way you can find it is in the National Code and FDA 195, if you will look for that standard, you can see. And we can see that here in a little bit later on in the presentation. But just so that we can understand what that influence is beforehand, wouldn't it be important for us to know what that potential effect is on the nearest homes beforehand? It's very important for us that we understand the rate of decay of that vibration.
How far out does the wave go?
It depends on the size of the charge.
Worst case scenario, what you're gonna be going up there, I'm just curious.
The wave goes a considerable distance, but it won't necessarily be perceived by human beings. So we have to measure that wave with a seismograph, and then because it decays, we can predict ahead of time, because that vibration is going to decay or decrease to 1/3 of its former value for every doubling of the distance. Now that sounds confusing, but let's.
Is that through dirt or is that through lead?
Good question.
It-
It
it's
depends on
both.
the bedrock competency, right?
No.
It does not.
I'm just curious.
What changes, what geology has an effect on is the frequency. Hard geology transmits higher frequency. Softer geology transmits lower frequency. While it's true that lower frequency decays a little bit slower, it's still very quantifiable from our perspective within a reasonable limitation, even prior to the beginning of a job. So we can go in and come up with a design based on those structures that we need to protect, and as we get to it. But just so to explain what I mean by decays to 1/3 of its value, we are limited to a particle velocity, a maximum particle velocity of 2 inches per second. So let's just think particle velocity is the speed of the elastic movement of that rock, which can only physically move 2 pieces of copy paper, but we're limited to how fast it moves back and forth, because the research says that is the best gauge to determine the potential for damage to structure. And so if we had a speed limit of 1 inch per second, let's just think about a speed of 1 measured at 100 feet. When we doubled that distance to 200 feet, the vibration level would be 1/3 of that, or a 0.33. So we can actually be able to extrapolate what that decay is going to be based on the charge we're releasing and the location relative to the nearest structure. And that's all part of the blast plan. We have to design, that's how we scale the blasting based on the location. because we need to protect that vibration level to a very conservative amount.
So you're not actually expecting damage to homes half-mile away?
No, not at all.
Why are you doing
So
this
then
service?
why the survey then?
Well,
So no one can come back and say, hey, geez, you broke my fireplace, you know?
Well, here's the reason why. It's very expensive, somebody's paying a lot of money for it.
Right.
Typically, you heard guys say that it's 250 to
But it's out
300.
of an abundance of caution rather than you're actually
Exactly.
expecting damage, that's my
What-
question.
If I was gonna shoot somebody's swimming pool, I wouldn't tell you if you wanted to swim, go do it a half a mile away, because it costs more than the swimming pool. But here's what happens in our business. Because in Massachusetts, the limit used to be 100 feet.
Right.
So if 100 is good, 150 is even better, right? If 150 is good, 200 is better. And so Massachusetts is now 250 feet. There's other places that are 300. But someone always understands the concept it's better, especially if you're not paying the bill for it. But here's another reason why. What you just said right there, suppose you got a pre-blast survey because you were 250 feet away and you were 300 feet away and you said, oh, you're out of luck, you don't get one. Now, in your pre-blast survey, somebody went through that house, your house, and actually looked here, there, and everywhere, and found a little cosmetic crack somewhere, right, that you never looked for. Just someplace that wasn't obvious, it's not structural or anything, it's just a little crack like that. You didn't walk through that house and see that little crack that was someplace in your house. You felt the ground vibrate like that. And you saw that crack and you said, you know, I don't really remember whether that was really there or not. I wonder if that's from the blasting. I don't know anything about explosives. That actually could be from the blasting. You know, that could be wrecking my house. So a pre-blast survey, not only protects you people, but boy, doesn't it protect us too.
Puts everybody, pay attention.
So now we actually have a pre-existing record.
Why can't you tell me how it's gonna be done? I emailed the people.
What's that?
I emailed them with a bunch of questions on Monday, I got no response. I got a response that somebody responded. Very tardive.
Okay. If you leave
Monday
me your-
morning,
if you
8:30.
if you leave me your name and number, I'll make sure somebody responds. And I'll give you my,
That's the contractor that's doing
That's a
Why don't
contract.
you respond to them right now?
I'm sorry?
Why don't you respond to them right now?
If we can do the presentation, I think that would be beneficial, then we can answer
I
that.
probably should.
If not, we'll get sidetracked.
Docket too.
I got my cards in the trunk, I'll get you.
So here's what a seismograph looks like. You can see there's a couple of these little blue boxes right here. It's composed of a sensor that's placed into the ground that measures the ground vibration. And that sensor actually has 3 little sensors mutually opposed. What do I mean by that? There's 2 horizontal sensors and a vertical sensor. The reason for that is the ground can be moving in different directions. That captures 3-dimensionally all of the vibration of the ground. See that thing right there? Almost looks like a microphone. Well, that is a sound pressure sensor. We're required also to record the audio that we make from a blast, because we're limited in ground vibration, we're limited to a safe level to protect the structure from damage. But in audio, we're limited to an annoyance level. In other words, we're not allowed to make audio at someone's home louder than what an annoyance level. Now, that's not determined by us. It was determined by research. It said when the levels were originally placed on a safe level, it was 140 dB. Now, don't think about that in a scale that we're thinking the scale that we do for hearing protection, because we're measuring on a different scale that's measuring pressure. That was the safe pressure, because it's not measuring the frequencies that we're worried about for hearing, because there are frequencies we can't hear as humans, right? A dog whistle, we
That's
can't
what
hear
wind
that.
turbines do, yeah, they make infrasound
Okay.
you can't hear.
Okay, so our seismograph, and blasting makes some of that too, right? So we have to measure that, and we're held to an annoyance level for sounds that we as humans can't hear.
Good you are, the wind turbine companies aren't.
Well, I can only speak, I'm a very small piece of what's going on here, but I wanted to explain what we have to go to. So these vibration traces right here are longitudinal, vertical, and transverse. Those are those 3
Well,
planes.
you said 140 was the limit for pain.
No, not for pain, not for pain. Safe limit.
So, what's your limit? You alluded to it, but you didn't say what the limit was.
33 decibels.
133, okay.
Now,
What's-
not on the C scale.
What's low?
Okay. And just so everybody knows, every 6 decibels, the sound pressure in this scale is either doubled, as you increase, or half. So if you went from 140 to 133,
So none of that 133 is audible range?
of course it's up.
You measure audible range too?
Yes. We measure both. We have to measure both.
Is there a limit on that?
It's the same, it's pressure we're measuring over a
So
wide spectrum.
audible is 133 too?
Because we're measuring pressure, we're measuring both audible and inaudible. And it is not the same scale. It's not a filtered scale. It's linear scale. When we look it up, it's linear, which is pure pressure, unfiltered. And the scales that we normally talk about when we're talking about construction noise are filtered to take out all frequencies we can't hear. We're measuring with our,
But you're not measuring audible
Yes.
separately?
not separately, no.
Okay.
No, if you measured audible separately, the levels would be far less with typical audio
Okay,
measurement.
but you're not measuring.
Well, we're measuring everything that's there. We are actually measuring. With a typical sound monitor, we're not measuring anything that we
You're not
can't hear.
measuring audible sound. You're measuring
No.
total sound.
We are measuring audio.
You're not reporting it.
We are recording.
I said reporting.
We're reporting all of it right there. Every single blast we have to report. See that trace right up
Where do
there?
the seismographs go?
They go at the worst case scenario, which is the closest structure that we need to protect, nearest private property, so we can record the highest possible level.
So not, like if you request a seismograph at your property or property edge, could you
Uh,
get one?
Guy, have you got, we have the ability probably to be able to,
We probably don't have the ability to do, if 100 people requested to have seismographs set up at their house, but we do have the ability to, to support multiple monitoring locations. So for instance, if, once we get going, if you had concerns, we could come and we could set up a seismograph at your house and measure some data. And if your neighbor has some, we could go there as well. But, we don't have the.
we can't take it off of
Yeah.
the closest because we have to record the worst case
But
and
if
the
you have
highest level.
extra seismographs.
But we like to try and make sure that people
Yeah,
can
and,
see.
and again, main drilling and blasting, like, I live in Vermont, I want to be able to come skiing down here and maybe run into you guys sometime, and I want to know that we've done due diligence. So if we're down here working and several neighbors have concerns and they want us to monitor a location, we're okay with that.
The information that you get from that, is that like available, like, oh, you just look at the seismograph and you can read it out like right then and there, or it has to go through some process to have it?
We get instant feedback. When the blaster goes to pick up his instrument, he's looking at that data, and quite honestly, and like Kenny, I'm a blaster by trade, I'm just dressed differently tonight. As a blaster, we want to know that information, because we're going to modify our design so that we're reducing the impact on neighbors. Our goal is not to come down here and upset everybody. Our goal is to come down here, do our job, minimize the impact, and go do another job.
How often I'm just curious, how often do you check the seismic?
Every day.
Day?
Every time we blast, we're looking at the seismic data. The seismographs are calibrated annually to make sure that they're recording properly.
So, at the end of every day, you have a blast report of every
Yes.
blast that's done.
Yes,
And you have a notebook that has these reports in it.
yes.
Where will that notebook be? Will it be in a public place where the public can come and see it? I know this is standard practice at quarries with Act 250, is that those blast records can be made available to the public. Because this is on public lands especially, will you agree to make the records available, for instance, in the town offices? Or is there a place where you can make them available upon request for the public to inspect those records?
I guess I would look to you to help answer that question.
I-
There's no, for this project, there's no public recording requirement.
I know, but I'm asking,
So, yeah.
as a matter of record, it is very helpful to the public, if the blast goes off, if they can go and look at the records that day and confirm what was happening and see that their concerns are relayed.
Oh, I hate to be the vague guy again, but because it's not specifically in our permit with a certificate or the special use permit with the Forest Service, and they haven't asked for that, I can't say, yes, we're going to, until either one of those parties go, you know what, it's on our land, how do we want to manage this process with our permit? We would check with them. I don't see it's an issue. We can check and confirm, because other projects, we do just provide it. It's part
If
of the report.
Iberdrola, the person you're subcontracting to, said release it, you would then do it.
He is Iberdrola.
Oh, you are Iberdrola,
Yes.
then you got the free ability to release that?
Well, it all depends on what the certificates.
No,
the permit
that's a
says.
minimum. Those are a
Minimum.
minimum. You can always exceed. You can buy everybody a spaghetti dinner once a week for 10 years.
I can't. I wish I could, but
Iberdrola
I
could do
can't.
anything they want. Those are minimum standards you
They
need to
have the
meet.
information, they can choose to not release it. And that's what he's
Right,
saying.
well, that's what it is. This is a
But,
liability issue. Why don't you
Sir,
say
in the
it?
past, I've dealt with blasting in a different state. And what had happened was the
Yes.
local town fire marshal was kind of the go-between between the public people affected and the contractors. In this situation, who is that? Is that you?
Actually, the town fire marshal, correct me if I'm wrong, because we've had this in other states. The blasting's regulated by the fire marshal. So he has like the authority to come in. If he wants the blasting reports, I'm sure by law, I think they have to give it to him. But also as part of the reports with the survey requirements, they would still have them. But I'm not the law expert of Vermont, and I don't know, but I think that's an
We're
excellent
closest
idea.
to,
Yeah,
because our
so-
forest fire warden, he's the closest to a
So,
fire.
yeah, I mean,
We don't have
Sir,
a fire
so-
marshal.
and the only thing is that they are available for the Forest Service and everybody else, and I just don't want to say, I don't want to commit to them to anybody outside. The fire marshal, with, I think by law, the other permitting people have a right to do it, but I don't want to extend it beyond that at the moment until I check into it.
We would like to make that a formal request, that you make the blasting records available to the public on a daily basis.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to make Jane a fire marshal. I'm a tree warden already, Bill, I got it, my desk is full.
How many blasts a day are you expecting? I mean, obviously, it depends on how the work goes, I know I'm construction.
Man, so, you know, I don't want to give an answer that's wrong. I just, you know, I expect that we'll be doing multiple blasts per day.
Yeah.
And, but I wouldn't want to give you an exact answer, because I wouldn't want to come in here and give you.
That's fine, just, I mean,
Yeah.
like, nonstop for 12
Typically-
hours, or a few?
I'm sorry?
Several, a few, a
Well,
dozen?
you know,
You can't
I would say that you know, 2 or 3 blasts a day would probably be, you know,
Depending on how you work.
depending on how the conditions are. You know, now, for instance, you know, we talked about the scale, right? So when we're working down the lower side of Putnam Road, and our scale is smaller, to get through the work, we may have to do more blasts.
Right.
You know, and that might be the days that we're doing 3 or 4 blasts a day, because we've, you know, we've scaled it down. So to be
Right.
efficient, we have to do more blasts. So, you know, in that case, you know, maybe we're doing 3 or 4 blasts a day on Putnam Road, and maybe we're doing 2 blasts up in the back. You know what I mean? So again, I don't want to come in here and tell you that we're going to do 2 blasts a day and then be a liar. What I'm going to tell you is that we'll be doing multiple blasts per day.
How much you get done.
Yep.
Could you do 20?
Be a good day's work.
Could you do 20?
I don't envision a scenario on this project.
Or you won't rule it out?
I will not rule it out.
But a blast is a ripple. You're drilling a bunch of holes and you hit them all at once. You go right down, right? That's one blast.
Yes, that's one blasting event.
One detonation, so you're saying 20 detonations would be a lot, but it could be a large area that gets detonated at once.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there more than one crew that works at one time, or you just have one blasting crew at one place?
I expect at times we may have multiple crews working in multiple places.
Okay.
And 150,000 yards for a project that's got a road 4.5 miles long, and that many pads for that many windmills. I live there. Every time, if I want to park a vehicle, I get stuck in endless mud. Every time I want to dig a hole, I hit his ledge. And you're 150,000 yards is what you envision blasting for your project.
Potential.
How much explosive have you used?
So I think we targeted, you know, roughly 1 pound of explosives per cubic yard of ledge. So in that, you know, in that sense.
That's a rule of thumb.
Yeah, general rule of
So you're
thumb,
saying 150,000 pounds?
potential.
So what's the max you would expect?
Again, I wouldn't want, I don't have that information.
What if it's all ledge?
I don't think that that's reflected in the geotechnical report.
Okay, so you have a report that could give you a better idea. What's that idea?
That's, you just gave it to me.
So by
You said
comparison,
generally
I don't
one
know,
pound
yeah, I don't have the answer.
per yard.
Yes.
He said generally, and I said, you said you have a geotechnical report that would tell us that we don't need.
Volume, the volume, 150,000. Yeah.
So you got a question?
So just sort of in comparison, since your company also did Lowell,
And
how
here's
much
the
blasting is
reason
Let's,
I'm-
let's one, sorry.
As of right now, Jerry.
So how much blasting is required here compared to how much blasting was done at Lowell? Like how many pounds of explosives did you use at Lowell? That's a finished site, so you should know that number.
You're asking me a question I haven't looked at in 6 years. I do believe it was in excess of 500,000 pounds of explosives. I don't know the exact number, and again, I don't want to give out inaccurate information, but I
So
know.
you're saying that
I'm
there
saying-
is
I'm saying
considerably
Lowell-
less
Yeah, there's
blasting?
considerably less blasting here than was at
Do
Lowell.
you know the largest blast that was done at Lowell?
Not off the top of my head.
The amount that was used at Lowell was 750,000 tons of explosives, and that was what was reported, and there's been conversations with folks that have estimated it to be closer to 1 million because there were overruns on that.
So the work here is substantially less than what was performed at Lowell.
But
Are
you
you planning
can't,
on blasting on the weekends?
No,
No, okay.
just to make it clear, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna get to that slide about hours, I think hours is coming. So,
Okay.
I don't know, we wanna move to the slide, maybe we answer some more questions along the way.
Yeah, and you want me to move the part about vibration along here? You know, I think we've talked about this, but we're measuring ground vibration, we're measuring air pressure. This is what that report from the seismograph looks like. And see this line right here, we talked earlier about what the safe level, this line right here was determined by 40 years of research to be the safe level for the weakest building material studied, which turned out to be decayed horsehair plastic. All other types of building materials are far more resilient. Anybody has horsehair plaster in their house, you probably knows what I'm talking about. That protects existing cracks in decayed plaster from even increasing in size. So that's what we're limited to. It doesn't matter whether or not you have the plaster in your house and you have more resilient construction.
What about mortar in the fireplace?
The mortar in the fireplace is way up here. So remember I said the weakest building material, which is decayed horsehair plastic.
Yeah, people have to have decayed horsehair plaster in their
Well,
house.
isn't that a good thing then? Because we're held to that
I'm
level.
asking about what we have.
And I'm telling you that it's gonna be much higher than that. And you know that yourself. If you took a sledgehammer and wanted to break down a decayed plaster wall and tried to break down your fireplace, which is gonna break easier.
Depends on the condition of the wall.
So you're basing your, settings on the weakest.
Exactly, we have to by law. We have to.
So anything stronger than that.
That's right. So there's a wide margin of protection by law that people are protected. And we have to keep to those levels. Now, what Guy's saying, you see right here, that's the levels we had for this blast right here. Was it right up there on the line? You see, because as a blaster, even though we might drive down the highway at 65 miles an hour, maybe somebody might drive a little faster than that, the speed limit is 65, we're not allowed to drive over the speed limit here. In fact, it gets held against us if we do. So we want to have a margin. We're that little old guy that's driving down the road holding up traffic. That's us when it comes to particle velocity speed.
So what you're saying is you have a limit, but you're not gonna thrive, and you're not gonna push pedal to the floor to make it to that limit. You're gonna keep it as low as possible,
That's
no
right.
matter what and anything and everything in possible way, shape, or form you can.
Well said. And that's why we're setting those seismographs up. Guy said we're checking them. We want to see what's happening because we're measuring audio too. Do you notice that it changes the audio when I talk? So depending on which way the blast is facing, depending on which way the wind is blowing, that affects how the audio is carried. Whether or not there's something in front of that audio, it varies. So having our seismograph out there and letting us see what's actually happening at those closest homes lets us monitor what's happening there. Now, what's really important for everybody to understand here, this slide right here. Here's that graph you were looking at, right here. That's the safe level. This is the human body graph over here on the left. Now, without spending a whole lot of time right here, do you notice that this kind of slopes down this way and this slopes down this way? Turns out, protecting our homes by using this and how our homes react to vibration is totally different than how we as human beings. What do I mean by that? This right here is frequency here across the bottom. That's 1 hertz, and that's 100 hertz. It turns out that low frequency vibration is more damaging than high frequency. All right, so our limitation goes down, down, down as that vibration. So I gave you 2 inches per second of the maximum. That's for high frequency, but we get down to low frequency, it's far smaller percentage.
So low frequency is like what hertz range you're saying?
Well, this right here is 1 hertz. Now, when we're talking how we can relate to that,
It's like 1 to the audible, like 20 or?
we're not talking, we're talking ground vibration here, not audio.
Okay.
So we're talking about ground vibration. When we think of damage from the ground moving, and we think about earthquakes. Down here, at 1, that's where earthquakes happen. You see, earthquakes cause damage. So it's our job as blasters to do everything we can when we look at that seismograph data to keep our frequencies as high as we possibly can. That means we're far away from the frequencies that are damaging. Now, here's the catch-22 on that. See this over here on the left? This is research that just took 100 impartial people, threw them into a room and shook them up. Said, how do you like being shook up? And what the people reported back is that we actually don't mind the low frequency at all. In fact, here in New England, we sleep through mild earthquakes. Why? Because it's such low frequency, it just rocks us back and forth. But when the frequency gets higher, we're going to describe that vibration as increasingly more unpleasant as the frequency goes up. So when we do exactly what's right for protecting the property, we also have to realize at the same time that we can perceive that much better as humans. We're just more sensitive to higher frequency vibration as humans. That's all it is. If I didn't come here and explain that to you, and didn't explain to you this line right down here, see where this dashed line here is? That's the perceptible level of vibration, this little curve right here. So depending on the frequency, we might be at 0.2 inches or 1/10 of our speed limit that we can feel the vibration. So when we get above 1/10 of what we're allowed, we could feel it. But it gets to 2/100ths, 0.02, when we get to high frequency. See how we're much more sensitive? Right now, this room is shaking. How many here feel it shake? Anybody feel it shaking? It is. If I set up a seismograph in here, I could measure that.
You can measure the tension in this room.
I think I felt some shaking.
All right, so we're born into this world, right? And the level that it's shaking at, we get acclimated. And we don't feel this shaking right now, even though it is. We just got used to it. Anybody live next to a railroad track, and the train goes by, and you go to visit, and the whole house shakes, and they say, what? And you say, how do you live with this? And they got acclimated to that. So, this perceptible level, as soon as anybody, whether it's construction, vibration, or anything else, as soon as we get above the level that's shaking right now, that's how sensitive we are as humans. So what's important about this is, as soon as we come to into a site to do blasting, we know. We can't sneak into town, blast, and run away and nobody hear about it. So we might as well be open and honest and let everybody know, yes, we're here, and you're going to be able to feel that because we can feel 1/100th of the safe level from our homes. So if I didn't come here today and talk to you about this, or somebody somewhere says, oh, you won't feel a thing. Well, that's not being true. You will be able to feel it. But what we can promise is we're not going to cause damage because we're going to be at such a small percentage.
But who's the go-between still? Who's the go-between between the people and the contractors? Because if my foundation gets cracked and you're going south, I want somebody to call before you get to his house.
I can't speak to the specifics of how this project is set up. Usually that's in a specification. I'm here about the science part. I think it's a question that probably deserves.
Okay, can we get to the stuff about this project? We understand that you're going to be in safe levels here. You can go to the next slide.
Well, I'm not sure that everybody feels that way.
To answer your question real quick, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. I know we didn't speak about it, but we're responsible for keeping complaints in the log and reporting to the select board. We found works other places that we put the select board as the point of contact. That way there, you guys will help manage complaints from residents, and you're not left outside the loop then. Instead of getting a report later, like 3 days later, or a week later, hey, I got a report from somebody up here because of this, we looked at it, we already addressed it, you're like, after the fact. We find it's better to be proactive, and that way the residents know that you got their back, and you will bring the heat to us if they're not being taken care of. And then our site representative will get directly with you, and it's timely and faster, and it's coordinated.
So we don't
If
have
the
contact directly with you, we gotta go through the
You
select.
can, I'm saying you can, but an advocate for you is your
Who's the
select
contact?
board.
Don't you have a contact that you could just tell us?
Yes, I do. The phone line stuff's not set up, but that has to be given to,
But that seems weird. He has a complaint, he comes to me, I go to find the shiniest hard hat on the site that's white.
we have a site manager, one single source person that we will, we're setting up the phone numbers enough now, so hopefully by Monday we have the phone numbers and address and everything set up. It's in the works this week.
We get notified not by certified mail.
That's a requirement by the certificate, but this actually works out good, even though you guys know. They can come to us, that's not a problem coming to us. But you guys want to know when the request was made, how long is it taking, are we doing our due diligence to respond to it, is it a proper response? And if you keep the select board in that process, we found that the local government likes that the best, which is the select board, and the residents know that there's an advocate on their behalf. If they come directly to us, they don't have that advocate. They can complain, and they can tell us what they want, we'll take care of it, but we don't want to cut the select board out of the process, which I think is worked really good before.
Seems like you're trying to make them the middleman.
They don't have to be the middleman, but I don't want them to feel like they're not part of the process or cut out. So it's really up to the select board if that's acceptable to them. If not, you guys come to us, we'll manage it, we'll give them a report and notifications after the fact, but they're not involved as the first line of notification. So it's really up to the select board and what they feel best for the residents and how they want to manage it, and we're open to either way.
So, I didn't follow a lot of that vibration stuff there, but what I'm getting out of this nutshell is that probably our teenage boys have created more damage on our sheetrock than you guys are gonna create.
Well, this next slide would be helpful right here, because one part of that research that the Bureau of Mines did over 40 years is they looked at some of the natural forces that were at work on our homes, because there's certainly areas where blasting never even takes place, that you may get a crack in plaster, or things may happen to a house. So as part of that, what they found out, and in fact we see this on sensitive projects, we did a project at West Point next to the historic chapel, we had an 80-foot cut in rock. Right, was within 50 feet of the historic chapel at West Point, which was structurally compromised and sliding off the hillside. And that single chapel alone was outfitted with 7 seismographs, it had tilt meters, it had crack gauges, and we could actually watch the sun come up in the morning, and on one of those gauges, watch a crack open up and close with the temperature change. And that's what we're saying right here. This research, and it's verified study after study, a temperature change of 10 degrees inside a house or outside a house has the same strain and effect as 2 inches per second translated into the particle blast. Remember what we said our maximum speed limit is? 2. Okay, so as soon as your temperature, the sun comes up and there's a 10-degree swing outside, or you open your doors and it cools off, that has an effect greater than 3 inches per second.
Except yours is happening at 100 hertz, not over an hour.
It doesn't,
It's happening much faster, so you're gonna physically feel your house shake, you just say it's not gonna damage it.
Well, that's what all the research, I didn't do all the research personally, but over 41 years, I can tell you that I blasted in some pretty tight places, and I know that that is correct. Because on occasion, when I blasted inside of a house, I cracked the plaster. Guess what? It takes just what the research suggests to crack.
But we'll feel it. If
Sure.
plus.
But
Sure.
you will feel it, yes.
I got a camp and it's pretty close to the 500 feet. I just had work done there a few years ago with the spring. When I come back in the springtime, I have no water. Who makes good for that?
So say that again, you're
I'm
500 feet away?
pretty close to that 500 feet, because you bought Joey's house, then there's a camp in my camp. I'm right in back of Pete's
Okay.
house. Now you start dynamiting, I'm not gonna know if something's gonna happen to the water. until I come up in the springtime. What happens in between that? You take care of that, or?
Well, if you're within a half mile, you have the right to get the well monitoring, and they will know. So that's all you do is put your name as, I want the well monitoring.
Well, my wife tried calling up this week, and they wouldn't schedule anybody on the weekend, so I had to take another day off, I guess, to come up here when you guys are supposed to come. She couldn't get any information.
Well,
Yeah, I
maybe
have that
that's,
information too.
It sounds pretty typical of what we experience in Lowell.
well, that's why I find it's better to pull, I don't want to say I want to pull in the select board, but it's their decision. If that way they're available, they're in their meetings, they have an admin. Hopefully, they're at least
They're volunteers.
congregating the
3
complaints and
words,
disseminating their information.
do your job.
Thanks, I'll do that. But
You guarantee
That's-
that
that's what I
water
suggest.
technology? You guarantee that spring's gonna be there?
I can't speak as a hydrogeologist and have specific knowledge of your spring, but what I can say is we're very close blasting the surface. We're not down affecting the
Yeah, but we're
aquifers.
downhill, so the blast comes out like a volcano, like St. Helena, you know?
But you can appreciate, remember we talked about path of least resistance, all of our energy is being directed up. I can personally say I blasted right up to wells, hundreds of wells, because when you drill a new well in a lot of
He's
communities.
talking about a spring though, that's much more sensitive, and I think it needs to be addressed specifically.
You could remove the overburden in the process of building your road, that his spring is fed by.
Okay,
and
so
it could
you're
result in
asking-
the water heading a different direction.
You're
and he could dry up
asking,
as
you're
well.
not asking a blasting question,
Well,
you're
it's-
asking.
It is a blasting.
Well, it's an entire project question. It
Okay.
could be part of your
And-
blasting,
and
you
the
open up a
folks-
fissure and
The folks
the
that would
water's
answer that
lost.
is a hydrogeologist, even
Well,
if
they don't know.
even if I think I know the answer to it, I don't have the credentials to get into.
Well, the question is,
What are you gonna
if
do about
there's
his-
damage done to a spring because a superficial water source gets
If-
diverted or lost
If
in a
it
fissure,
is
then
related.
will
if it-
Iberdrola, that's actually a question for them, will they reimburse the landowner by drilling them a well or building a new spring where it can be?
Yes, because if it's within a half-mile radius, we do as part of the survey, the insurance, the bonding, everything else, they get back to make sure it's covered. So as long as he's part of the program, he's covered.
When are they gonna come over and give me, you know?
You should probably get that in writing. It's usually once they're done, they disappear.
Bond.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly.
I think the
I think
second
the
part of
insurance
his,
was like 5 million, so I don't think it's gonna be more than
Yeah,
that.
insurance companies.
I think the second part of his question, being a seasonal camp, and he's gone 4 months through the course of the winter, how is he contacted and how does the inspections get set up when he's not here? Can it be done without him being present at the property? And can that information be documented and then sent to him during the course of the blasting? Or is it gonna be a pain for him to receive that sort of information along the course of the project?
You know, guys, since you're doing that.
Yeah, generally, I would think that the inspector would want to have a representative of the house or the structure there while they perform their work. I don't think anybody would want to go into or onto somebody's property without them either being present or giving explicit permission. So I think in a case where you are not physically in the area, I would have to believe that and by the way, it's a third-party contractor. We're not doing this portion of the work. But I would have to believe that, we could make accommodations. If you want to get your well tested, there's got
The well tested, that water's pure drinking water.
well, if you want your well monitored, I have to believe we can find a way to make that happen. And I think if we just get your information, we'll.
Who's your
That
subcontractor?
tonight?
Continental Placer is the company that's doing the work.
And do they have
And they're-
credentials as hydrogeologists?
I don't have all the credentials in front of me.
Well, I'm concerned because I believe they were also involved in another wind site where when somebody came to take the water sample, they actually put the lid in their mouth and it came back. So the qualifications of who you're hiring matter to the people here.
Certainly
So
understand
do you have certified hydrogeologists, people who are certified in taking water samples the correct way?
I can't answer the question for the consultant that's not here. I've seen their qualifications, and I know that they've done this kind of work for many, many years.
Well, this person had done this work too, but they
So,
came up with a
Again,
whole
I wouldn't be able to
positive
speak
test.
to an instance that I don't know anything about.
Will you make sure that they get back to us with exactly what they're gonna do, who's gonna be there, what their credentials are, what their protocol is?
I think that's fair, and I think if anybody wants to leave their name and number before they leave, I'll get them a pad, and I'll make sure that whoever,
Send me an email, and I'll forward you the email I sent Monday morning.
whoever puts their name on a list in it, I'll make sure that the contractor responds to.
So who is,
Respectfully.
just to be clear, where's the chain of liability? You guys are working for Iberdrola to set the site up for them to put the turbines up, correct? So, I mean, as part of blasting, something can, get broken, the groundwater flow could shift, the fractures could collapse, and a well would dry up. That's not really you guys, 'cause that's just part of the business. That's Iberdrola, right? I mean, you guys,
No, the
You're not
law,
gonna-
each contractor is responsible for their own scope of work. I mean, that's.
no, but in terms of the off-site effects of that work, you guys are gonna enforce, if my well went dry,
Yes.
and I did a pre-test and after it went dry.
It's
never
his
been dry.
insurance company, not
So
theirs.
you guys would
Yes.
seek
Yes.
reimbursement, and you guys would be the advocate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir,
Did you guys, you said you did the blasting at Lowell?
we did.
On, we're just, wanted to show something here. What kind of compliance is this, fly rock? What does that do? This is from Lowell.
My mother took the picture.
His mother took the picture. Happened quite a few times.
There's,
It flies into the woods probably 500-600 feet. Is that, so what kind of compliance do you do? Do you mat everything, or do you
That's
just
not
let it
matted.
go?
No
That
match
shot
on
is
it.
not matted. And like we've been talking about all night, every shot is scaled to the operations that we're doing. So some of the sensitive areas here will be matted, and others will not be.
So this is what you're gonna expect, fly rock flying everywhere? All the way
Again,
through
the Lowell is a different project, and the operation was significantly different than what we're seeing here.
woods? Okay.
Do you have a
Yeah.
sense of the amount of dynamite used in that, or the explosives load on that? Would
I
that
don't
be
know
a-
that, I do not know
would that
that,
be a
I do not
20,000 pound
know
load?
that specific shot.
So, can you give people a sense of the largest blast load you would use on this site?
I do not have that
Would
information.
be 5,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds, 15, 20?
Similar to, the question that was asked about how many blasts per day, I wouldn't want to give the wrong information.
Right, but
We-
5 or
we will
20?
We'll scale our blast so that it's appropriate for the operations, and we'll try to be as efficient and move through the project and be out of here.
so there's no limit.
There's no limit.
But no matter what the size of the blast, you will be still within those tolerances.
We are
you've
still
already-
required, to fall in the tolerances.
Is the Agency of Natural Resources from the state of Vermont supposed to monitor you guys? Because they were supposed to monitor here, they were supposed to be overseers here. And they didn't do a very good job. I was wondering, are they supposed to be coming here and working with you, or being a part of this?
They are a part of the project, but their focus and expertise is not blasting. I think that's the state fire marshal and some other agencies, but it's not ANR or DES.
Is there somebody that oversees you guys, or you just are freewheeling it?
The Department of Public Safety in Vermont is the regulating authority.
So they'll be down here?
I don't know the answer.
They were called in on one wind site when there was fire up flowing on the neighboring property.
I'm not aware of that.
I don't know.
You could try.
Well,
So, are there any other questions related to this project specific? Because I think that's a good question. Are there any project-specific questions that we can address?
What are you using to blast?
Type of explosives?
Yeah.
Let's have Kenny finish his last slide, and then we'll finish that.
So, I'm just here for the technical part again, but I wanted to show you a very huge blast, a 10,000 pound blast. But this isn't up in a remote section. This is for CBS's corporate, across from CBS's corporate headquarters in Rhode Island. The reason I'm showing this picture is to show blasting in relationship to the awesome power of Mother Nature. Right along here where this truck is parked is a high pressure gas line. You can see some construction trailers in here. right there is a blast that has a total charge weight of 10,000 pounds. Well, we didn't discuss this earlier. We don't set off 10,000 pounds at a time because we don't put 10,000 pounds in each hole. So there's a huge number of holes here, all separately delayed. So when we look on that seismograph report, instead of one big spike, we have a series of spikes together. So the concept that how many pounds determines overall vibration or impact, it's not. It's the charge weight per delay that determines the vibration and the end result of the blast. So that's something we didn't cover earlier. But the reason I want to show this is, this blast was all loaded, ready to go, and an electrical storm came up. Now, in blasting, we've got to stop operations or shoot before an electrical storm come up. It started to rain, we said, okay, let's wrap this up. We're very close to doing that. And why I want to talk about this is because it's the human reaction that we have to vibration that really drives our response. And it happened to us as a young kid when some adults said to us, don't worry about the sound of the thunder, it's the lightning that you have to be concerned about. But no matter what, all of us still to this day will jump, not at the lightning, but will jump at the thunder. So you're going to see in this, you're going to hear there's a 1 minute warning, and I apologize, I didn't bring my speakers, so you're going to have to struggle a little bit, but you're going to hear a 1 minute warning starting right here on the site. It's a tremendous downpour. And you're going to see 10,000 pounds go off here. This is 1 minute from the blast. But just before the blast goes off, there's going to be a strike of lightning. See what the camera operator does when the lightning strike happens. Hear it raining? Lightning. Didn't move when the lightning flashed. Couldn't help himself when the thunder hit. Now, you hear that thunderclap? It's still rolling, still rolling, still rolling. You can still hear the thunderclap rolling. Still that same thunderclap was rolling. £10,000 total charge rate. High pressure gas line right there, buildings and structures. Yes, rock can jump up in the air, but it has to be controlled for the area that you're working in.
What were the pounds per delay?
On that blast, that might have been probably 15 or 20.
And what are the pounds per delay you expect to use on this site?
Well, isn't it going to vary with scale? Because remember, we have to scale a blast.
I'm trying to get some basic numbers from you. I know a lot about blasting. I'm just trying to understand the
So there's going to be a
general
range.
specifics of what
When
you're
we're
going to
in
use.
close, that scale is going to be very much smaller, and when we're further away. Now, I don't have the specific designs here in front of me because I'm detective with that.
Do you have,
We have typical designs, and the scale will be adjusted depending on where we find the legend.
what's the max?
I don't have the max.
Can we get a copy of your designs?
The blast design?
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Well, let me just say,
Yeah, you can jump.
I'll just jump in. The blasting plan was actually submitted to the Public Service Board, so it's public record, and in there is a typical blast layout, the MSD sheets, the type of explosives, the requirements we're fulfilling, all that's public record, so you're more than welcome to download
Are
it.
the pounds and the pounds per delay of typical blasts in there?
I don't know if the delays are in there, the pounds are not in there, I don't believe, but
So as a for instance, I referenced that the average rock cut is 5 feet. If we drill a 9-foot hole, you might see a typical pounds per delay in the 14 to 15 pounds per delay.
If you do with the 31 foot?
We have the ability again to scale it, and we may shoot half a hole per delay, or for me to speculate at this point just wouldn't be accurate.
I'm not going to speculate, you guys are real.
I mean, I could tell you the worst case.
Here's the fact of the matter, that design is not going to happen until we get there, see the rock, identify it, and design the shot. Every single blast, every single blast has its own design. There isn't one size fits all.
Okay, but you're
In a 31-foot hole, you might see charge weights in the 80 to 100 pounds per delay.
I have a quick question. Hopefully it's an easy one. Will this presentation, is it posted online somewhere or can it be made available? if it isn't?
Give a copy to the select board, if that's okay, to Josie, and if people want it, they can ask for it, but I don't have a median, like a Dropbox or something else I can post to that, I don't have that, so.
Isn't there a website for this project?
Not that I control. There's probably websites out there for this project, yes, but none that I control.
Can't find them.
So the fuel that you use, right, is info? That's what was in the public record, that we're supposed to go to the public record instead of getting a direct answer.
That is one of the blasting agents.
So that's fuel oil. So you're gonna drill a hole in the ground, and you're gonna put fuel oil in there and detonate it.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
What does ANFO stand for?
Ammonium nitrate, fuel oil mixture.
Okay, so there's no fuel oil in the ammonium nitrate fuel oil
No,
mixture.
I didn't say that. You think we're pouring liquid fuel oil in there, and we're not.
I didn't say liquid fuel oil.
Okay,
I said fuel oil.
so that,
And you said ANFO is not fuel oil.
so, no. Well, when I hear fuel oil, what do I think of? I think fuel oil.
And you're trying to say it's not fuel
And
oil.
I'm trying to say,
When the name is,
Anfo is not fuel oil, it's a blasting agent.
right?
yeah, it's ammonium
It's ammonium
nitrate
nitrate
fuel oil mixture.
But it's
Yeah,
not, but it's
So
not fuel
does
oil.
it contain fuel oil?
It's got 4 to 6%, which is embedded into the ammonium
And then you're
nitrate.
bending that in the rock, right, and detonating it. And then you're gonna take that rock and refill it back in there. Correct?
I can't tell you where the rock is going, but I can tell you that that's what an explosive is. It's composed of a fuel, and it's composed of an oxidizer. When you have an oxyacetylene tank, torch, you light the torch, you're gonna get a nice smoky black flame. When you crack on the oxygen, what happens to that smoky? Turns blue. Now, can you cut steel with that, just like that blue flame?
No.
No. You have,
You can't.
you can't cut it. What do you have to do to cut it? Add more oxygen. Now just put that oxyacetylene torch on steroids. That's what the ammonium nitrate does. Provides a massive amount,
Ammonium nitrate fuel oil.
but it provides a massive amount of oxygen.
I didn't get an MSDS sent to me that said ammonium nitrate. It said ammonium nitrate fuel oil.
Well, you shut up and just let this guy explain this for about 5 minutes.
So when you have,
I'm asking about the discrepancy between what he's saying and what.
Well, shut up
told
for
me to
5 minutes and let him explain it.
Hey, you're tired, go home. Listen to him, he's got the floor.
That massive amount of oxygen means it's an oxygen-rich mixture. And so it fully consumes that 4 to 6%.
I'm taking reaction kinetics at MIT. I understand reaction kinetics.
Okay, so what's the issue?
So for those of us who aren't taking courses,
I don't
is
even
there any
need
left
fuel
over?
oil in the ground.
The
When you
issue
go- when you-
is,
when
the
you fire,
piece
is
of
there any
paper
left over?
that he has says fuel oil on it. It doesn't just say ammonium nitrate, it says ammonium nitrate fuel oil. And because it's particular, he has a problem with it. And you did not say ammonium nitrate fuel oil, which in their four
I
contents
think maybe I
gives
did.
a problem
Because you said,
to what you
correct.
said.
He said, what does ANFO stand for? And I said, ammonium nitrate, and F is fuel oil, FO is fuel.
And every other time that you said it, you said ammonium nitrate.
We all agree on what it is.
So I'm done with my piece, except that there's a technical question that I haven't answered. And maybe I didn't answer all of them. Is there a technical question that I can?
Does that fuel completely burn up in the blast because of the ammonium nitrate?
That's the point I was trying to make.
Nothing left over.
That's the point I was trying to make.
That's the goal.
100% efficiency.
It's an oxygen-rich combustion.
Is it all burnt or is most of it burnt?
It's my belief that it is. And here's why I say that. Because we work in very environmentally sensitive environments. Oftentimes, and I can give you an example, for 7 years, we've worked inside of the Rockland-Abington Reservoir, blasting, to increase the size of the reservoir. All the while, the water was being used and consumed by the two neighboring communities and tested daily.
So you mean you didn't make ripples in the water, or the oily ripples in the water with the fuel oil you put in the ground?
I'm saying that that had oversight by various layers of regulatory folks and environmental people who tested that water every day because they had to send it out to the people every day.
So what you're telling me is you know your job.
I know my aspect of it, and I know that there are experts who have confirmed, because if I thought I was out there damaging or harming people, I'd find some other line of work to go into. I don't really get paid for really what we do here. I happen to be a fourth generation, my son is a fourth generation, I'm a third generation blaster. It is interesting work. I don't do it necessarily for the money. I do it because it is very interesting.
Do you ever anticipate accidents?
Any job an accident can happen. But I gotta tell you, we're so highly regulated. In fact, I come from Massachusetts, all right, so that's why I'm not really closely associated with this project. It's a different division, but I am the technical manager, so I can speak to the technical things. In Massachusetts, when you have a fly rock, they take the license away. When you have an exceedance with vibration, even if it doesn't cause damage, they can take the license away. They'll take it permanently. So the environment that I come from, and blasters are regulated to, if you understood that right here in New England, millions and millions and millions of explosives are used every year, tell me if you wouldn't have heard about something terrible happening at Mass General Hospital if there really was any kind of an accident, even with a surgeon slipping a knife down there. Wouldn't that make the papers? How does millions and millions of pounds of explosives, and you can look it up, the IME as a website, and you look at the federal government's listings by state of the amount of explosives that are used, even in your state is in there. And believe me, you care about it. You do care about it if there's an accident. And there is, once in a while. But as an industry, if you were to look at my life insurance rates, it's going to be far lower than anybody else in construction because we have to work safe, and we do work safe. And insurance companies come and get us if we didn't.
Is it possible for there to be a hot load in the box of explosives that come to the job?
No.
Well, there is another issue here, though, with the use of fossil fuels. This is a wind project that is being pitched as clean and green and getting us off fossil fuels. So hearing that it requires all these fossil fuels to use it is kind of killing the message or there.
How'd you get here this afternoon, this evening?
I have a question.
This is a wind energy project.
Well, I understand.
The question now.
I'm just saying that to get to the end that we'd all like to get to, there's steps that we have to take. You know, there's trade-offs. Should we just say no wind power anymore?
Not on our national forests.
Or should we?
I'm not sure what the answer is.
Well, I think the board's got a question.
I'm just a normal person like everybody else.
We are not the select board. This is
Nobody gives you a parade. The blasters are in town, yay, we're happy. What I think a lot of us want to know is, in the event of any problems, then what, and don't give me a general answer for this, what's the course of action if my well goes bad, my foundation cracks? And I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't want you people on my property taking pictures and videotaping my stuff. I bought the house 3 years ago, I got a home inspection.
Yeah. I asked for a protocol on what they're doing so I can do it myself.
Well, this
And
is
they refuse to give it to me.
No, but this is my question directly to them in person. This is why everybody's here. This is why we get registered letters. Like, you know, in the event, everybody, you know, there's small business owners here. Everybody could have a problem with your business. So what separates the man from the voice is how you rectify the problems that you have. So with that being said, you're a blaster. You got a problem, go.
All right, so we've been in business 50 years, right? We didn't last 50 years by coming in, blowing up towns, destroying wells, knocking people's houses down, and then just running away. We're fully licensed, we're fully insured. We do have protocol in place. If an accident were to occur, we have a process by which, you know, you could file a damage complaint, and we would begin the process of investigating the accident. We you know, again, we've been in business a long time, and it's by trying to do the right things and not running and hiding. You know, you said what separates the big boys it's by doing the right thing. And as a company, Major Only Blasting, it's one of our founding principles, we're gonna do the right thing.
Filing a
Speak-
claim, do I get you in my living room to see that gaping hole that meteorite just
So,
blew through my living room?
what I spoke to was how Maine operates. This project has probably more specific protocols that, would probably have to be followed. I don't,
To answer your question, how you get homeowners insurance, most states, you get homeowners insurance, without even knowing it, the insurance company sends somebody for a drive-by, look at your house, take pictures and send it, because they want to know what's the baseline, so if you do a claim later, did your hole already have a roof, a hole in it, and then you're claiming it after the fact. Even if you don't feel comfortable with somebody on your property, if it's a third-party inspector, if you want to be covered by law, it's going to be hard to sell something that you didn't allow someone to inspect beforehand. And you're going to say after the fact, hey, I got this hole in my roof now because a rock came through it or something else. You're like, well, how do we know that it wasn't pre-existing and we don't even do it ourselves, or you do it because it's kind of like tainted information? That's why I go to a third party and go, hey, just do the drive-by, inspect everything, let's document it, and we have the gamut of inspections you want, and we'll make sure it's correct. So that's the normal process we do. So
When he's done with you, I'd like to come back.
yeah, so if you go and say, hey, my foundation's cracked, I'm sure it's cracked, we'll go through the process we take to correct it and make it right, whatever it takes.
and part of that investigation.
Hang on.
Part of that
Can I respond to what he said?
Part of that investigative process that we do is, we do fill out the blast reports with the seismic data, all the shots, videotaped and recorded. There's a lot of evidence. We're not, even though we're way up on the ridge line, we're not just, blasting and not documenting everything we do. Everything we do is highly regulated and highly observed. If there was an incident that required investigation, we have information that would allow that investigation to move forward. And we have to provide it.
You just said you're going to an impartial third party that you're paying for to protect your interests. That is a lie. It's not a misstatement, it's a lie. They're there to protect your interests. If you give us a protocol, we can hire our own inspector, and that's just as valid to be in third party, unbiased opinion. But you refuse to give me the protocols.
Well, let me clarify something. I mean, this is an educational meeting for me. I hope it is for a lot of people, especially the blasting part. I feel a lot better about blasting now, but you guys have a bad experience for other wind farm developers.
I got a bad experience with this one.
We haven't even started here, so I don't know what the...
You started in 2006.
So, if I can get to my point is, I could sit and say we're going to do the right thing and make things right with everybody, but because there's a bad taste in some people's mouth from previous experience that we weren't even part of, even the company I worked for wasn't even part of, I'll just use one example. We had a gentleman, how to make it right, answer your question. There was a guy who was far enough away. He come out later on, and it was like almost a year later, said, hey, I got green rings on my toilet. And we're like, what? This is absurd. But we try to work with the community, and the guy goes, well, what do you want? He goes, well, can you put a new well in for me? I go, if you want a new well, we don't even want to argue with the guy. If you feel like you've been impacted and it's a reasonable accommodation, we try to accommodate. We put a whole new well in for the guy because he had a green ring on his toilet. No substantial proof that it was there before or after, whatever. We didn't want to argue with him. We wanted to make him satisfied. That's our goal. Our goal is to partnership with the community and make things right. So using that example, even if they did a pre-post or didn't have one at all, that would not have been caught as part of the brief, as part of the inspection process. That's just probably rusty water or something else, and maybe a shallow well the guy had, he just wanted us to fix it. But we do make things right. We do partnership with the community. Other developers develop wind farms and plan on selling them. They don't plan on sticking around. We plan on sticking around. We own and operate the wind farm 20 years. We own 55 wind farms throughout the U.S., and we're there for the long haul. We make a commitment to the community. So we're not going to come in and have someone with an issue in a house and leave him hanging and not being taken care of. So,
How many years have you worked for?
Iberdrola, I think next month will be 6 years.
How many times have you managed a setup like this?
5 times.
5 times, okay. Now, if I go and hire my same home inspector who did the home inspection 3 years ago, and I have him do everything, and I get my well guy who drilled my well 2.5 years ago, and I get all the stats from him, is that proof enough? Or are you saying I gotta use your guy?
I'm not saying these are, because actually, the blasting company coordinates the inspectors. We don't even do that. So you can say it's our guy, it's not really our guy.
It's your guy, if you're
It's
paying.
your it's paying for it. It's your son. So there's our, we would take that into consideration, but I would use the previous example. If you have an issue and it's something that came up that could be our responsibility, we're gonna take that responsibility and address it. Okay?
I came down here from the Northeast Kingdom. I lived about 20 miles short of the Canadian border. And I know this is your issue here in Searsburg, so I'm not going to even pretend to tell you guys what to do. That's entirely up to you. I sat in a meeting like this in 2012, and even though I was deadly opposed to the wind project, I actually stuck up for main drilling and blasting. I said that they knew their business for drilling and blasting. I also asked a couple of questions, two of which really stuck out in my mind, and two of which we were screwed on later. Okay? I asked how far the setbacks were going to be. What were they going to do? And they said, before we drill or blast, we will contact all adjoining landowners. My parents owned a big swath adjoining them. They were never contacted. Another question I asked is, I said, when you're drilling and blasting, and you're going to be coming through this area and you're going to be dynamiting that, what about for people that are using the land next door? And as I said at the beginning of the class, they actually dynamited some of my folks' land. There was a lawsuit that was ultimately settled on that. They said, oh, we wouldn't actually interfere with any hunting or anything like that. I had 18 law enforcement and two tracking dogs throwing off my folks' property during the middle of partridge season. They put a 1,000-foot line from the blast line down the side of the mountain. They took 200 acres of my folks' 600-acre farm with no compensation for 6 months. So what I would say is, while main drilling and blasting are competent, and by the way, if you're close enough, you're going to be doing a lot of window washing and a lot of vacuuming, because that grit goes right through the house. And I will say that they are competent drillers and blasters when they have a reason to be. But I would absolutely, and this is why I drove 3 hours with about 15 minutes notice to get here for this meeting. This gentleman here says he does it because he enjoys it. I do it because I feel I have a duty. I didn't get paid for this. I'm not asking for any compensation. I won't get paid for it. I'm going to stay in a hotel here tonight because it's a that damn long drive back. It comes out of my pocket. So I came down here to tell you that you need to hold their feet to the fire, and you need to get this stuff in writing. Because otherwise, what you hear tonight is just what I heard in Lowell in August 2012. Big crock of crap with nothing to support it. And again, they're competent blasters. But I wouldn't believe a promise that you hear. Not from them, not from Iberdrola, or anybody involved in big wind. And that's all I got to say. I appreciate you folks listening to me. I came from a long ways, and it's not my fight, but thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you for making the drive down.
Yes, thank you. I'm from Starksboro and Huntington Center, and I've been fighting wind projects for quite a long time. Now you'd say, okay, what are you doing down here? This is not your backyard.
That's what I was wondering.
Well, let me just tell you why. This is public land.
You guys need to remember, we've been through this before.
I know that.
We've already had a wind project
Right.
set up, and it worked out pretty okay, and it's pulling it there, and
Yep.
good water.
Right, well, that's okay. So, I'm just saying, you know, you're talking about blasting here. Most of the people that are in this room probably haven't gone to a wind project to see what it's like in the
We
blast.
got one right down the road.
Okay, have you gone?
They blasted for that one too.
Okay, all right. So, the way I look at it in the state of Vermont, you have Lowell Mountain, you have Sheffield, you have Georgia Mountain, you're gonna have this place. And each time that you change the topography of the mountain is gone, pretty much. You're gonna blast the area up there, and it's not gonna be any cooler up there, it's gonna be warmer. You're gonna have that sun beating down on there. I know from Phillips Brook in New Hampshire, they blasted 4 miles all the way for 4 miles. Every spruce knoll, every little knoll is flattened. And that's what's gonna happen, you know, you're not gonna have a mountain here again. And I just wanna know, would like to know, you know, you're in the blasting deal, and I'm sure you guys do a great job, whatever you do with your work. But I was just wondering, being public property, I mean the public, owned by the public, how do you feel about this project? I mean, you're gonna be blasting on public property. It's property that I own and everybody else here in this town owns. If I went to Maine and blasted on public property there, how would you feel there?
Ask Catan.
I mean, I just
Just as a point of reference, our regional offices in New Haven, Vermont, our guys are based here, so it's not necessarily.
Well, even in public land, I mean, how do you feel about blasting on public land? I mean, whether it's right or wrong, it's all our
I feel like
land.
we're gonna do the best job that we can for this operation, and we're gonna.
And it doesn't bother you to blast inch by inch by inch for 4 miles or whatever?
Well, there's a few points I can, bite on that real quick. One is, the notice for the town was a good turnout, because the notice requirement's a half mile. They actually reached out to the towns, this goes, who is within a half mile? And, you know, they gave a conservative list, so it's more than what's actually a half mile. So we probably got a better turnout, and people's actually gonna be impacted, so we're trying to be open and give it to everybody we have. So, you know, we're not hiding anything, we're trying to do what's right, and not saying other projects aren't right. But a couple things for this project, one thing I want to point out is it's highly overseen by the U.S. Forest Service, and they reach out to other agencies. And, you know, you can laugh, but the requirements on this project is a lot more stringent on the other projects. Let me finish, please. The other projects in Vermont. A lot of things is the width of the road that's being built. It's limited to a 22-foot wide road, where our standard wind farms in other parts of the country, it's 40 foot to get the crane down to build the cranes. It's smaller here. We don't have the impact. We have things like you're talking about this expansive left open space. When you're done, the Forest Service has requirements like put stumps back around the turbine locations and make it look like bear habitat. And the long-term bear study, so when bears cross the road, allow the woods to grow back up. So the environmental impacts and concerns have been addressed. I already talked about limiting impact to the bear-scarred beech trees and leaving the trees for the bears. And everybody goes, well, you know, that sounds good, but how's the end of the day going to work out for bears? I mean, I've walked the site, looked at it. I've actually seen bears walk in there myself. I did build a wind farm in Plymouth, New Hampshire. You guys can see it almost, you talk about bear impact, almost every trip I go up there after construction, I see a bear. So it isn't like the bears aren't going to be here afterwards. They're going to be here. And the requirements for this project is a lot more bear friendly than any other project I've ever been on. So you're talking environmental. Some things we didn't talk about for blasting to get more detail. May-June restriction for birds. We limit the amount of blasting time throughout the day, and it's seasonal how it changes for how it affects breeding birds. And birds are on the nest and when they breed. And that was all done by the state, and we modified our work plan to accommodate them. So there's a lot of accommodations and a lot of things that's taken place to take everybody's concerns and account for them in our plan when we do construction. So, you know, again, that goes back to trying to do the right thing and make things right for everybody. I know we're not going to make everybody happy, but we are trying to do our best. So, I don't know if you guys got any more questions.
I just got a statement.
Yeah.
That it was very effective giving the line card for the blasting company. So now we know that you're a blasting company, and here's your capabilities. That's fine. I got zero information that was specific to this because we don't know yet. We'll do that. That'll be a field measurement. We don't know yet. How are we going to get that information? We're just going to have to accept whatever you decide, right? And if I come up for the weekend, am I going to know if you're going to blast, or if I want to come up here for a day? Are you going to give a schedule that next week we're going to be blasting, or I'm going to get up here and then start hearing sirens every 10 minutes?
Well, I'm gonna put main blasting on the spot, but
I want you to put it on your website.
Well,
what I'm asking for.
I don't manage the website, I don't even have a website, so you're asking for something, a tool right now I don't have. Not for the project, the wind project specifically. I don't, there's some out there, Iberdrola Maine. I work for the engineering construction group. I don't control the website. I can look into it for you, but let me answer a couple of questions. One is, in my experience of blasting, because I've been around a lot of blasting, different wind farms, I am not the blasting expert, but correct me if I'm wrong here. But usually they go out and they do a test shot, and they test everything first so they know what they're getting into, and then they kind of move out from there as blasting goes. That's why they don't know, which makes sense to me after seeing it.
I want some visibility on what their planning is. I mean,
So,
It is, and then,
I could just jump in, and again, going back, I have your card here, we'll generate a call list, if you want to be notified before we blast, we'll notify you.
what do we have, an email list, not a call?
It's a call list that we do, I'm sorry, it's not an email list, but I'd be happy to put you on our call list and notify you prior to blasting.
We're gonna put any specifics about what you're gonna be doing, like, we're gonna bore down 30 feet, or is it gonna be 2 feet?
How far?
No blasting every.
oh, let's go on the town.
You already answered that.
Or if you want to ask me after the time.
No blasting on the gas.
So you guys must have a rough general work plan of what your work plan and your time frame is, and of course that changes as you get into things, but going forward on a project like this, you have to have some kind of trying to meet these deadlines, trying to have a work plan. You're gonna do this at this step. Is that available for us to be able to know what the work plan is? I think that would address a lot of things.
Yeah, all the stuff that for the general work plan has been submitted to the Public Service Board, so you can download it, we have it, but it's there, which says when blasting is going to start, how it's going to happen, the material is going to be used, the windows are going to blast, all that general stuff, even hole arrangements, they get into the details of even what's a pre-blast, what's the blast log look like, an example of blast log. There's a lot of detail in that that's public record provided. And then when they start construction, they'll have to fine tune it because there is different rock formation types throughout the project and how they work. So they'll modify it on site as they go, but the general windows, the middle of next month, however the weather accommodates them through the year, they'll have to stop probably for a few months this winter. And then in the spring, finish up.
So can you tell me specifically how to access that, like without me having to spend hours of trying to figure out how to get to that information?
I'm not the state expert, whatever the Public Service Board docket number, and I don't remember the docket number if I have.
Can't you provide it to the town here in the town office?
I will. I can provide a link to it.
Why don't you put out a printed copy of the blasting plan here and what's in it?
I can, that's great. I'll put out a printed copy of the blast plan.
So one of the issues that I've seen happen at other wind sites for the neighbors is that there is no window, and this compares to what's done in Act 250. So for instance, it's turned out to be very disruptive for the neighbors to have blasting go from 8 in the morning until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So if people want to go ride horseback, or they want to do things where it's actually dangerous to have a blast go off, you could get thrown from your horse. What Act 250 does is it generally restricts it to like 8 to 10 in the morning, 2 to 4 in the afternoon. Can you, and that happened on Lowell, it managed to get restricted a bit more after it was just sort of all day and people didn't know what was going on. So if there was a way for you to provide the townspeople with some window of when you'd be blasting, then they would know when they could be outside, like from 10 to 2, and not be affected by it.
Well, that's probably the answer you want to hear, but the window is 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, except holidays and not on the weekends. And the other thing is they can do the pre-blast notice and automatically give you call generation, hey, the blast is happening this day at what time. And Maine Blasting is willing to set that up for residents that are interested. You get automatic call, hey, this is what's happening each day.
They'll give an exact time on a day? They won't say from 8 to 5?
Yeah, so what we generally do, it's an automated system. Blaster will communicate with our administrator, and she'll initiate the automatic call with those, with the time frames.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do understand what you're asking.
Is it possible at all to give the public some window during the daytime when they know that they won't be exposed to blasting?
I wouldn't be able to do that at this time. I don't have that information at this time.
Yeah, the window right now is 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. If you want specific times throughout the day, the automatic call will help you determine when that's going to take place, and then you can modify however you fit them.
So if anyone's interested in that automatic call list, I'll stay behind.
I don't know.
And I'll collect your
And
name.
that's 24-hour notice?
We can set up as a 24-hour notice, day of notice. We can, again, we want to try to accommodate to the best of our
I
ability.
mean, day of notice doesn't work. You're out on your horse,
We
you
can do a
get a
20
cell
do a
phone, you
24-hour
lose
notice.
signal,
Well-
and then,
Yep,
Well,
we can do a 24-hour notice.
quite a few of us here that have to drive several hours to get here, so
Right.
if they're gonna last tomorrow, it'd be nice to know.
So we could do,
So
we
what
would
is this,
be
like,
happy to
yeah.
do a 24-hour notice to anybody that leaves their name and number for me. I'll stay behind and take that information.
And you don't blast on the weekends?
We do not blast on the weekends.
Then at home, I'd be able to see it.
Sorry.
But then at home, I'd be able to see it.
2 days I'd be able to watch it, you're not
Yeah,
even
you're
doing
not
it.
gonna do it.
I know it's 9 o'clock and I don't want to not answer everybody's questions, so, I mean, does anybody have anything else? We're hoping to move through these.
Yeah, you gotta do the inspection before you start blasting.
Yeah, so we have a baseline to make sure that way there it protects you to say, hey, this was there or wasn't there, and then it's no argument, hey, you can clearly see on this report what was there and what's not on there, and it just helps facilitate the whole process.
Check with you tonight. Apparently, people in New Hampshire don't wanna know anything about it.
The pre-blast survey,
Yeah.
it's clearly spelled out the requirements right in the blast.
I'm sorry,
plan.
I didn't hear the question.
The pre-blast survey requirements, is there anything about it?
Yes.
That's in the blast plan, and we will give a copy to the town, and they can post it on the board. It's public record, we don't have a problem giving it to you, you can read it, have it. We're not the type that's gonna try to hide information. We'd like to be forthright and open, but some things I just don't have the answers for today. So if you guys have additional questions, I mean, I hate to keep saying Josie's gonna be our point of contact, because she hasn't committed
Can I
to
get a
it.
copy of those?
But the town's got, we mailed 2 copies, so I mean, if you wanna.
Town office is open when I'm working out of the state.
So, you can send the request, send the request to the town if you're a town resident, we'll try to
I'm
accommodate.
sending a request to Iberdrola.
So, we don't wanna manage it straight because then it becomes a pissing match. Kinda like it's
I'll
heated
just
tonight,
email Andy and ask
and we
him
find it
for
looks
whatever
better
it is.
and adds a little bit of like tums to the acidity if we can direct it through like a third party or something, so that way someone else professionally can say, hey, this is this guy's thing, we wanna get it taken care of. If it's between us, you're never gonna be satisfied with the response. And I don't think it's going to work real well. That's why we're asking maybe the select board can help facilitate making sure that the townspeople are taken care of. So,
What are the things and when do we sign up for different notifications? So one is the survey, if we're interested in getting some baseline stuff. So that's one thing to sign up for. Is that you or you?
So the certified letters, I believe 41 certified letters were mailed out. As of this afternoon, I think they received 9 responses. So I would strongly encourage anybody that received the letter to reach out to Continental Placer and schedule the service. If the service is scheduled, they'll take care of it. As far as the 24-hour notice, that's not a public service board requirement. That's just the main drilling and blasting offering. I'll stay and I'll take whoever's number wants to have that applied.
So there's 2 things to sign up for, just those 2 things. There's nothing else.
The pre-blast survey and the well monitoring is independently being monitored by, or being administered through Continental Placer. And then again, if anybody wants to be notified 24 hours prior to the blasting, we'd be happy to do that.
Will we have access to the site on weekends, or is that going to be exclusionary?
I'm sorry?
Will we have access to the site on weekends, or is that an exclusionary?
you're talking about to our construction site? No, because of safety, we will not allow people to come and use the site where the roads are during
So we
construction.
can't see what you're doing.
That's right, you can't, it's closed. There's actually a closure order issued by the U.S. Forest Service for safety. You know, they don't want the liability of someone getting hurt either, the federal government
How's
doesn't.
that marked?
How's it marked?
Yeah.
There'll be signs posted.
I walk out my back door, I hit your blasting without hitting a set of human footprints, any other sign of civilization. How will I know how far I can go up the hill?
It'll be posted.
So
You'll
they'll
see
post
it,
it.
yes. And there's a notice and a map that will be posted at the entrance and some other public places. The Forest Service said they'll get with us and tell us what the posting requirements are. We just received the notice. So whatever their guidelines are for posting it, a copy will be sent to the towns, it'll be posted here. But if you're asking if you can access the site, it's not the entire U.S. Forest Service parcel, it's just a setback distance for safety, what we're doing for.
Which is, adjoins my land. I mean, I'd have to get in my car and drive down to Woodford.
How is that
I
going to
don't-
be secured? Is there going to be security guards?
Is there going to be security guards on the Forest Service land?
Yeah.
No, there's not, but in the notice, you'll see that violating it, there's some type of ramification for the federal government for violating the closure order. And they have their own law enforcement. They're the ones that manage the closure order, not us. So,
How long you gonna do it out here?
excuse me?
So think you're gonna do a whole project in 1 year?
Our plan is to be done a major civil construction thing by October next year. You'll see turbines being commissioned and generated, but yeah, we'll be done by the end of next year with everything and online before December, or the end of December 2017, yes.
Good luck, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's,
Handled it first time, I imagine we handle it second time.
no.
This is much bigger.
All right.
These are much bigger, and it's gonna be a whole different scene.
Well, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it.